Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I am joined today with a very special guest, Justin Deschamps. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Justin is the co-creator or the co-founder of a little website, well, probably not so little right now, Stillness in the Storm, that Josh and I have been following for years. Justin, a lot of your articles, the things you post, the aggregate of information is just Stillness in the Storm for me. Well, it is Stillness in the Storm. It's a fantastic name. It is an amazing resource where you can find an awful lot of information that is very counterthink, alternative news, I guess you could call it that. An amazing aggregate of everything under the sun, anywhere from, how to decode the control grid that we are all under, the consciousness control grid, the mind matrix, from how the cabal actually really works, and deeper and deeper into the truth of our own nature, spirituality, consciousness, all these things that we love to explore on Ever and the things that we talk about ourselves. So Justin, thank you so much for joining us here today again.
Great to be here. And it's an honor to do what I do and have it mean so much to people. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, more and more. I think the whole world is waking up right now out of our collective trauma. And one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the show is because, Stillness in the Storm is probably growing right now quite a lot from what I see in the traffic rankings. And, there's so many things we could explore, talk here together. But one of the things I really want to ask you is your opinion or your feel of the pulse of the collective consciousness right now, because you're probably seeing where consciousness is gravitating to right now on your website as we are waking up out of, our individual trauma. And then there's this collective trauma that we hear about as well. So if you could talk about that a little more, and also for those who don't know what Stillness in the Storm is for you and how it all started. And
Sure. I guess I'll answer the first or the second part first. So Stillness in the Storm evolved out of originally it was a blog talk radio show. Me and my partner Julian, we started our wake up experience in 2010 in relation to seeing a film called The Gerson Miracle. And The Gerson Miracle is all about hidden cures for cancer that were discovered by Dr. Max Gerson. And his work was, I guess he made his breakthrough in 1928, and then he testified before Congress. And so in any event, without recapping my whole wake-up experience, we discovered pretty quickly that there were some things being hidden from us. And once we accepted the reality that cures for cancer were a bit suppressed, then that kind of threw us down the rabbit hole. We're like, okay, well, what else is being hidden from us? And I mean, I'm still taking the plunge to this day. I'm constantly discovering things. So after about a year or so, Julian and I have been doing a lot of research. We met our friend Jeremy, matter of fact, not too soon after kind of taking the awakening plunge. And he had been doing some radio, and he noticed in our conversations that Julian and I were having that, apparently we were fairly eloquent and could speak and, share ideas. And he said, you guys should come up with a radio show. And, we're like, I don't know. Who are we to do radio, So we just said, you know what, that's okay. Let's give it a shot. So we were, following a whole bunch of different things at the time. This is 2013. And there was a lot of opinions. We just felt like if we could contribute to the conversation, not saying that, we had all the answers and you had to listen to us, not like that at all, but just contribute what we thought our perspective was. We felt like we could add to the collective shift that was happening. And that's what we did. We started the show in March of 2013. And in July of 2013, we decided to create a blog to feature some articles and content that we were talking about on our radio shows. Then that quickly evolved into its own kind of animal. And as you were mentioning in your introduction, it became kind of a synthesis of two different style websites. So there's, generally speaking, there's two categories of websites, media websites. There's original content websites, and then there's scraper websites. And we do both. We write our own original content, and we produce our own original content, usually a synthesis of all the stuff we're looking at, but then we also share a whole bunch of information. And my kind of philosophy with Stillness in the Storm is that as individuals, we're living life. Life is chaotic at first. There's things that we don't know, we're coming to understand ourselves and the world and reality. So that's kind of like the storm aspect. But through all of those interactions, we create a still point, a center point, where all of the various pieces of information can come together and make a singular perspective on that truth, a one truth, a holistic perspective. So that's kind of like the theme of Stillness in the Storm, is that we have all of this information, and I encourage the readers to think for themselves, to discern for themselves. But then I also participate in that process by writing articles or producing videos or doing interviews where I give commentary about, some of the things that we talk about. So that's kind of like the general philosophy of Stillness in the Storm. I'm really trying to participate with everybody as first a kind of a teacher, and then secondly as a student of everything. And through that work, I feel like we can contribute a really positive message, an empowering message, so that people can become their own truth seekers, their own gurus, their own experts. And ultimately, instead of having to rely on somebody else's opinion to determine what is true, you begin to develop your own opinion, your own perspective. And that's really where the magic happens. And I think that's kind of what awakening is, the process. It is an evolution. So to answer your next question, where is the collective consciousness at? Well, oh shoot, I mean, how much time do you have?
All day. And well, before you answer that question, I
Sure.
just got alerted to the fact that unbeknownst to me, I forgot to plug my computer charger in, so I'll be right back.
Okay, right on.
Okay, no, we've got all day, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. So,
Right on.
I mean, yeah, where do you see collective consciousness at, based on just the website, what people are paying attention to, what kind of comments? I think
Sure.
Stillness in the Storm is a very cool, like a petri dish of the sample of the macrocosm.
Precisely. And I actually use it for that way. I mean, there's, insofar as the work that I do, it may seem like it from an outward perspective. It's like, oh, well, Justin and Stillness, they're just sharing articles from other people. Well, there's a lot that kind of I'm using for that. And one of the reasons that I like to share content from other people, one, because if somebody's already written down an idea and made an argument and presented something, I don't have to do it. Somebody else has done it. Great. That I can focus on other things. But I also get to it's like a litmus test for where people are at. And one thing I've noticed, there's many trends I've noticed, which is that the overarching collective is trending towards awakening, self-empowerment, autonomy, sovereignty, becoming your own expert, becoming your own priest, that kind of thing. But that's a process. So the vast majority of people that seem to frequent Stillness in the Storm, I can tell what they're interested in somewhat. I don't have a direct knowledge, but I get a glimpse or a gleam what they're interested in by seeing how popular items are. And one thing I've noticed is that there's a trend towards sensationalism, and this pretty much goes for all media, is that if there is some kind of a sensational story, like if let's say some new whistleblower came out and they said that there were extraterrestrials here and they were going to help the planet heal and they were going to introduce free energy technology and put an end to the cabal, that's like a big event. That's a pretty sensational thing. And that type of information is highly sought after. Any type of information that seems to speak to issues related to the shift of consciousness, the changes that are taking place, and the fact that these things are rolling out without your direct participation is something that people seem to be very interested in. I think there's a lot of reasons why. We can get into those psychologically. The content that I think is more salient and important and poignant, which in my opinion is, what can you personally do to improve yourself? How can you get yourself together so that you can develop your own autonomy? You can become the master of your own kingdom, your own realm. And then through that, how can you become better contributor to the collective that we're experiencing? That type of content, which kind of puts the burden on you I think is the most important, to be perfectly honest. I think that type of information, if people were to take up that type of perspective and really do that inner work, I mean, we could shift the planet like real quick and have an amazing ability to do that. That information isn't necessarily as popular. So what I think is happening right now is that we're in this transition of the collective consciousness. So kind of taking a step back and looking at, okay, well, where are we at as a collective? I think what's happening is that we're still in the kind of primordial waking up phase. Waking up is a really hard thing. I mean, psychologically, your belief systems that you have, they help you control your reality. So for us as finite creatures, experience is chaotic and organized. The biggest component of your experience is chaotic. One, because you don't know what it is, and two, because your belief system is incomplete. You're building your belief system as you go. The belief system that you had when you were 4 years old could only explain so much. But now that you're maybe 25 or you're 35 or you're 55 or however old you are, hopefully the belief system that you've been building throughout your life, the rule book, the manual that allows you to manage your life has gotten better. And now you can explain more of the experience that you're getting from reality. So that's what the belief system is for. So our mind and our consciousness organizes our experience so that we can make sense of things. So that the reason I bring that up is in the awakening experience, what happens is the belief system that you were using for your life for some period of time buttresses up or conflicts with some new belief, some red pill experience that you've had. And that red pill is more truthful than the totality of all of the experiences that you've had before. And that creates a new catalyzation point. So basically when you're woken up to something, when you've believed for your whole life that the government really works for our best interests and that they're always honest and they're always fair and they're really trying to make the world a better place, and then you learn about something like 9/11, well, that really undermines that previous belief. And now, if you're really honest with yourself, if you really follow the truth wherever it leads, which I strongly encourage everybody to do, then you're going to have a dark night of the soul moment, because your beliefs that you've been using to make sense about reality have effectively just been destroyed. And now you have to go into the abyss. You have to face your dragon. You have to tame your dragon. You have to face your fear. And in the act of facing your fear, you create a new belief system that better explains the reality. And that's what the awakening process is like. And that is incredibly intense. That is hugely traumatic if you don't have that those skill sets. And to be perfectly honest, the way we raise our kids and the way we indoctrinate each other in society, we don't give each other the good tools to do that. So,
I have an 8-year-old daughter, and she asks me questions sometimes. I'm just like, well, Dad, what's out there on Mars? I'm like, well, they tell you. I give it all out. It's like, well, apparently there might be bases on there, and they're all being hidden from us by certain beings.
Right.
But you decide for yourself. It's like, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of a crazy thing. So yeah, just to finish my thought from a minute ago. So I think where we're at as a collective is that we're still in that initial phase. It's like the grieving process. You know, when you first hear about something you weren't expecting, you didn't necessarily want, it's a shock. You get angry, you're kind of in denial. You know, you don't necessarily want to accept the whole truth about that situation. And the whole truth is so beyond what we normally think that we have to acclimatize to it. So there's some of us that we learn these truths. We're like, oh, you mean I've been contributing to the status quo of reality on our planet this whole time. I've been a pawn for the elite this whole time, and I didn't know it. Well, man, I really need to look at myself, get my stuff together, and then change who I am so that I can beneficially contribute to the world. Well, that takes a lot of inner work. You have to really do that long, dark night of the soul moment, face what you've been doing, face your own inadequacies, face your own mistakes, grow as a person by doing so, and then start to become more altruistic and service to others. And that takes a lot of work. So I would say the cream of the crop, so to speak, that is building. There are people that are really becoming more interested in that. And every time I put out a piece of content that speaks to that, there seems to be more and more people gravitating towards that. The people who are gravitating towards that are really starting to get a handle of the concepts, the ideas, and I think that is profoundly encouraging. But then there's the bulk of the population that is still looking to be saved. They're still looking for ET saviors. They're still looking for the government to, whether it's Nasara or mass arrests, they're still looking for something outside of them to fix the problem so they don't have to do the inner work. And I get it. And, just to speak to that a little bit, I'm not saying that all of the burden of what needs to happen to change our world is solely on us. I do think there are extraterrestrials, there are spiritual forces that are here helping us, but we're on the front lines. We have the most culpability from a causality aspect. I mean, we were here from a certain point of our lives. We've contributed, we've worked these jobs, we've been paying our taxes, we've unwittingly endorsed various nefarious things. So we're here. We have the karmic load, so to speak. And that's encouraging. It means we get to be the ones that kind of hold the flag. We get to rush into the front lines, and we can do some amazing work. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but that's
No, I love
what I
it.
think.
I love it, man. Keep it coming. It's really good to hear you speak. Um, you know, singing my song, what Josh and I talk about is sovereignty, authentic living, thinking for yourself. And that's good news, and a little sad to hear, that's where we're at. But we just have to accept that. And of course, not everybody's at that. There are outliers, but it is like the same way I see it. It was just that period of denial at first, right? And everybody wants to be saved. And we are very fortunate here where we live right now. I live in Vilcabamba in South America and Ecuador, and a community of people where there's a lot of people in that inner circle of just owning their shit and
That's awesome.
consciously working on the inner structure so the outer hologram represents something different. And it's really that like the bad side, the way I see it, it's like, it's really hard to get into it. People really resist that first step. First step is the hardest, to just finally realize it's all in you. You got to stop projecting your shit out there. You got to start working on yourself. But once you actually start, it kind of gets difficult. It's traumatic, it's hard. But once you get over a few road bumps, and let's maybe speak about what those are. I don't know, the question that just popped out of my mind as you were speaking. It'll come back to me. Yeah, what do you think are the most essential speed bumps or realizations that a human being must have in order to actually begin to authentically think for themselves and assert reality?
That is a great question. Well, I would say that there are certain milestones that you have to move through. And I know, words like "have to" kind of trigger people. Like, well, I don't have to do anything. I can do it. I'm all, my own way.
Let's call them road signs. If you get to this one, take a right. You're getting
right. Exactly. So, but there are certain, like you were mentioning, crossroads that depending on the choice that you make, you're either going to really like rocket propel your evolution, or you're going to kind of wallow in a little bit of obscurity, and you're going to take the quagmire path instead of the beaten path, so to speak. And I think one of those first is recognizing that you have the power to understand reality. So there's a big meme right now, or a big indoctrination program, which says that you're not smart enough, you don't have enough experience, you're not wise enough, you haven't educated yourself enough to understand things directly, personally. But the sooner you can let go of that and embrace the opposite belief, which is that literally anything you set your mind to with enough focus and dedication, you can accomplish it. So there's a really good axiom I heard. It's echoed through a whole bunch of different works, but the best version I've heard I came across it from the Urantia book. And what the Urantia book says, I'll first say the normal version we hear, which is all things are possible with God. Well, the Urantia book articulates that a little bit more succinctly, and it says that all things that are possible, so all things that can be possible, are only possible through God. And what that's essentially suggesting is, if you really think about what those terms mean, well, first of all, we are as individuals in finite instances of the Creator. So being able to understand that that's who you are, that's what your heritage ultimately is, that's a huge realization to have, to kind of enliven and motivate you and inspire you. I mean, if you think that you're just some kind of a random living machine and life is random and there's no meaning to anything at all, then that doesn't really create a good outlook for you. You don't have a lot of motivation. But if you can think to yourself that you have within you this spark, this seed of creator essence, the very thing that created all of reality, everything that is within you at the deep center of you, then wow, that gives you a lot of difference of what you're capable of. And then if you start to embrace that, you empower yourself and you start to shed the victim mindset, well, that can be incredibly empowering. But it's also kind of scary because let's face it, what's easier to come to realize that we have a lot of challenges and there's a lot of suffering and a lot of hardship, and that we might be able to be the ones who can change that? Is that easier? Or is the idea that we're all victims, that we can do nothing in reality to change the situation, and that just do the best you can? Well, the second choice is the easiest one to believe, because it takes the burden off your shoulders. You're not responsible anymore. So what I would say is taking responsibility for your own life, for your own knowledge, for your own understanding, your own comprehension. It's scary because you're going to immediately come to terms with the fact that you probably don't have the skills. I mean, let's narrow this down a little bit. If you wanted to learn, let's say, why, like some science of ascension stuff, that's probably a pretty good topic. If this idea that we are evolving in consciousness and we're literally physically evolving, and as we do that, the material bodies that we inhabit organize and they change. Well, there's a lot of science that goes into that. We're talking about biology, we're talking about electromagnetism, so physics. So if you wanted to really understand this idea of ascension at a really deep level, and if you don't know what physics is, if you don't know how electromagnetism works, if you don't know what entrainment is and synchronization, then you should go and study those things and come to terms with what they are. And when you do that personally, when you actually take the time, it is gonna take time. You may have to spend 6 months just learning about basic, very simple aspects of science. But at the end of that 6-month period, you're gonna have a new view on your reality that is going to be able to help you organize your experience into the future and help you organize things in the past. So that's the power of consciousness, is that when you take responsibility for your own life, when you make a vow to yourself to say, you know what, despite all the hardships, despite all the pain, despite all the agony, I'm going to do the best I can with what I have to work with. And I'm going to keep pushing myself and learning and mastering myself. Every time you make a little step forward, the load becomes a little bit easier, and then you start to feel inspired and enlivened. So,
yeah, there's an old saying: when you take one step closer to God, God takes 2 steps closer to you. I find that to be.
I like that. So,
one of the things that are most real for me right now in this process of owning my stuff and evolving is that in the beginning, there was a real fascination with the fireworks, right? And the awakening process, with the merging into a state of oneness or entheogenics down here in South America. I was doing tons of psychedelics for many years. And over time, that really faded away. And it's becoming really, really simple and really down to a personal level, because, I think we often tend to overlook that. Is we want to go so far to cleanse the world of the negativity and own all that stuff and be an activist in some way. I got identified with that for many years. We don't really check into what's really here in our own backyard and in the garbage can underneath the rug. Simple things. You're like, how do I relate to the people in my life? How do I relate to myself right now? And that has been the most painful one to realize, is that all this need to change the world and save the world, and by virtue of my own process, has really just first and foremost been an attempt to save myself. I realized after many years of doing many world-saving activist type things, starting businesses to save the world of this and that, launching documentaries about cures for cancer. You mentioned that. We just did a documentary on MMS a year and a half ago. yeah, it was all just this attempt to save myself and to actually save Casper. And I realized I never really actually knew how to live, how to actually be happy. And so I'm in the process right now for the past year of just like recognizing, hey, there's actually a personhood here that really wants to live and wants to be happy and wants to live this life instead of
Right.
just constantly trying to force the ascension process, so to speak, and get into these super enhanced transcendent state. And that's where the mind likes to think, if I get into this transcendent state and hold it all the time, then I am getting closer in somewhere. In reality, my life is falling apart, my marriage, my parenting reality, my body, everything. And so I'm finding when I take care of the most basic things, um, like getting up in the morning and meditating for even 10 minutes, doing the stretching and treating my body well, and
Hmm.
going on a diet of doing things that actually make me happy, which is
Right.
a mind-blowing concept. I'm actually for the first time beginning to see how that the outer world begins to reorganize around me. Um, yeah, life seems to be getting better.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's maybe a little off topic, but it triggered that for me. I think
Sure.
a lot of people, maybe you can add to this, tend to think that the awakening process is, highly complex. But it's, again, starting with your own stuff and owning your stuff.
Hmm.
Not that hard.
No, not at all. I mean, it's complex in application, but the principle is very simple. You just follow the truth wherever it leads. I mean, that's the wake up experience right there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what makes it complicated is that when when you come to understand some new piece of information that conflicts with the old piece, what makes it hard is that we are attached to the old piece of information because it did something for us. It satisfied some need. And it's kind of like a changing of the guard, so to speak. I mean, you could think about, and I haven't put this out there yet, but I'm working on this project describing consciousness in terms of a pantheon of deities. So usually, a pantheon of deities is organized from some type of primordial void space. So in a lot of
Can you
mythological,
define pantheon for us, for those of us who don't know?
sure, absolutely. Pantheon is referring to a large collection of god-like figures. So, for example, the ancient Greek gods were a pantheon. You have Zeus, Athena, things like this, and then there was the Roman gods. Jupiter, Neptune, Venus. So those are a pantheon. So in most of these traditions, what ends up happening is there's some type of primordial void where everything's undifferentiated. Then some like primary god figure comes out in the Greek tradition. It was Kronos. Then Kronos begot these other gods like Zeus, Athena, Poseidon and Hades, and then they got together and they had to overthrow the primary god, and then they created all these other gods, and each god became like the archetype of something. So, for example, you have Mars, the god of war, you have Venus, the god of love, you have Jupiter, the kind of the fatherly figure. Right. So, well, your consciousness is very similar. Every time you meet a challenge, every time you have to make some decision about something, every time you have a hardship, right, then you create a version of yourself, some type of belief system that allows you to deal with that experience.
Hmm.
And that satisfies an emotional need. So a really good example of this, I feel like, is when you're in the deep throes of very intense pain. So I'm not talking about like, oh, you stubbed your toe, or, oh, I accidentally like burned my hand or I cut my hand. I'm talking about pain that's so bad, you're like questioning your existence. And when you have a pain like that, which I've experienced several times in my life, you literally the way you cope with that is you start to lash out against reality itself, like against being, against the God of being almost, and say, why is this happening to me? Why am I experiencing this? It's almost as if you're questioning the creator and being like, you're blaming the creator for the state of pain that you're in. And that kind of resentment archetype, that resentment ego consciousness that forms inside of us, and that sits in our consciousness when we go through these experiences. and that guides our behavior moving forward. So what happens when we wake up is that idea that we're this victims of some horrible God that is trying to impose some negative thing on us. That's going to hinder us moving forward. So if you can't be in a state of appreciation about life and the universe and everything while also holding the belief that the whole universe is secretly against you because it's hateful. You see how those things conflict with each other?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what makes it difficult, what makes the wake up experience difficult is that you have to let those things fight each other. You have to go through that introspective, that inner phase, that meditation phase of contemplation. In alchemy, it's called the distillation phase. So you put all the ingredients together, you boil them all together, you're boiling away the impurities, you're letting the dead wood burn away. And that can be challenging. So how do you face, what did that experience of blaming the universe for your pain do? Or sorry, let me rephrase. What did the belief that blaming the universe for your pain do? Well, it gave you some level of comfort. It actually satisfied a need. It was functional. It had some purpose behind it. So the technique to awakening is to recognize how the beliefs and actions we had in the past served a function. Addiction is another really good example of this. When we're addicted to things, when we're in that moment of addiction, when we're craving our addiction, our brain and our heart coherence cease to be in coherence. So they're out of coherence. And we're experiencing negative emotions. We're like we're yearning for our coffee. How many people wake up in the morning and the first thing in their mind is, oh my God, I need my cup of coffee, right? Or their cigarette, or, their muffin, or whatever it is. Okay. Well, when you get that thing that you're addicted to, whatever it is, what happens is your brain and your heart, they go right into coherence, and you get into extreme coherence. You get into a bliss state. So some people would say, well, that's just indicating that you're addicted to the substance. Well, yes, but what it also indicates is that it's doing something for you. It's satisfying some need. And the challenge when you're waking up is you're going to realize, oh man, I mean, let's take cures for cancer, for example. A lot of times when you recognize what causes cancer, which is toxic food and not eating properly, not eating beneficial foods, then you realize some of the food that you've really like for me, I love pizza, isn't too good for me. And I have to slowly start to let go of this. So then I have to ask myself, well, what is this pizza doing for me? And is there a way that I can create some new thing that satisfies the same need, but in a beneficial way, in a virtuous way, to use a kind of religious term? So that's what can make awakening psychologically really difficult or complex, to use the description you used earlier, is that if we don't have a good meta model or overarching philosophy for where we're headed in our awakening experience, then it can make facing these conflicting points really difficult, because it's like, man, well, I want to be healthy, but I really need the emotional comfort that comes from smoking a cigarette. And, how do I figure out a solution to this? And there is a solution. That's the cool part. That's the encouraging part. There is a solution, and you're not alone. You don't have to do it alone. We can work with each other to support each other in this process. So.
Mm-hmm. So here you are, you've got this website. You guys are publishing a ton of stuff on, Corey Good and the Cabal and UFOs and all this very, very interesting stuff, of which most of the attention that you're saying goes to sensational stuff. And I can see that because, I'll go on and be like, I was following the whole cosmic disclosure for a long while. Not so much these days. Having second thoughts about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it.
Sure. Definitely talk about that.
actually, let's dive into that. What are your thoughts on Corey Good and cosmic disclosure and David Wilcock and that whole deal?
Well, here, how can I speak to this first? Okay, well, I'll say first of all, from an evidence and authenticity perspective, do we have any evidence, or do I have any evidence that I've come across that says that maybe Corey Good is not who he claims to be? And for those who don't know, Corey Good's an alleged secret space program insider and whistleblower. Claims to have worked in a 20 and back program where he went back in time, for 20 years, worked in the programs, was age regressed, did that 2 more times, and then came back and then lived a normal life, quote unquote. And you can check out his stuff at blueavians.com for free. But okay, so is there any information to say that Corey Good may not be telling the truth? I haven't come across any prima facie evidence to suggest that. I've heard a lot of theory and speculation to say that he is not telling the truth. I haven't seen anything that actually pans out, and I'm looking at it from a epistemological, lawful perspective. Okay, well, somebody's making a claim that Corey Good is not telling the truth. All right, well, what evidence do you have to support that claim, and what argument are you using to explain why that evidence supports your claim? And I've reviewed quite a bit of it. I was the subject of a smear campaign as well as Corey earlier this year, so I kind of got the opportunity to review a lot of this stuff, and I couldn't find really anything. I mean, nothing at all, actually. I mean, there was no positive evidence to suggest that Corey Good was not telling the truth. There was a lot of positive evidence to suggest that he actually was telling the truth. But there's no, and I'll finalize that statement by saying there's no direct evidence to confirm his accounts. So we have, when I say there's evidence to say he's telling the truth, I mean the coherence of his statements, so how well the statements that he speaks actually work with each other. Then you have corroboration with other sources, so that is present. And then just reading his body language, his demeanor, the conviction with he speaks, all of that is data suggests that he is actually telling the truth. That being said, though, it's controversial for a lot of reasons, and it's kind of creating.
It's a big red pill to swallow.
It is. It highlights one of the. I think that's the interesting things about it, and then one of the reasons I like to share Corey's work is, first of all, the philosophy that he describes is completely on point. So, whether or not you can get behind Corey insofar as his alleged secret space program status, he's actually somebody that is waking up in his own regard, and he speaks to a philosophy of personal empowerment, of doing the inner work, of getting yourself together so that you can positively contribute to the planet. So even if you can't believe him, his secret space program stuff, you can likely get behind the philosophy, or at least acknowledge that the philosophy has merit. So that's kind of the general overview, but I get the feeling that there was something more specific you wanted to talk about. Is there a more direct question you wanted to ask in that?
No, I think you nailed it. I myself, I'm a huge fan. I don't really think these days much. I don't know. I just lost my mind on too many psychedelics in a journeys.
Yeah.
But I really, sometimes my heart just sings, this is true and you need to listen. And for me, my whole life, it's been a journey on free energy and anti-gravity. And since I was a little boy, I had dreams and messages of flying and craft, and I just knew that the world out here and the technology we had was completely dumbed down in some way, and I wanted to find out more about it during my life, and I did, and I did a whole podcast on it. I don't know if maybe you want to listen to it some other time. And so when that info came out like 2 years ago, when he started really coming out in Gaia, I just downloaded that book by a PhD guy. I forgot his name.
Dr. Michael Salla?
Yeah, Michael Salla. I read that PDF, and it was just like, oh my God, this is all I wanted to know when I was 5. Like, really?
Right.
For me, where I'm at with that now is like we're digging deeper and deeper these days. A new documentary just came out. Maybe you've heard of it, Europa.
Oh, yeah, it sounds familiar. What is that one about?
The real history of World War II.
Oh, okay. All right. I think I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it yet.
It's a real big red pill. I haven't watched it yet. Josh did a week ago, and he cried. I think he said he almost cried. And
really,
I'm gearing myself up to watch it because it's a really, really tough red pill to swallow, and it's so much that I'm even afraid to mention it on this podcast because people call me a Nazi or something. And that info is so counter, wires crossed with everything that Corey is saying. Or maybe, because you just realize, God, this control grid that we're under, first of all, is much older than we possibly think. It's been thousands of years of lineage of being controlled by who or what knows what. And the layers of deception are deep. There's layers upon layers upon layers upon layers upon layers,
Oh yeah.
and so like, whoa, it's really time to like, yeah. I'll let you guys do your own judgment. It's the documentary is called Europa. It's like a 7-part documentary, and
Oh wow. Well,
I
is
mean,
it free online or is it
yeah, it's
you?
free on YouTube, and I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
the seed got planted for me 2 months ago. We just had one of maybe have you ever followed Sasha Stone?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so Sasha Stone, we're in contact with his group, and one of the guys who really works closely with him, Greg Paul, was down here a couple months ago, and we were sitting. He said, "Watch this video." I was watching one of Sasha Stone's videos when he was talking about sacred cows and like all these things that we think are true, which are just complete Zionist programming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was showing like Mother Teresa and some other events, and then he threw up Hitler in World War II. He's like, "How many of you know the real history of World War II? Oh, interesting. Check it out." I won't say anymore. So I was like, I really want to know this, and sure, it came up like a week ago. But yeah, the people who conquer, people who win the wars are the ones who write history, not the people who lose them. And so,
Yep.
yeah, I don't want to get too much into it, but it's like I'm in a place where they're thinking, "Oh my gosh, there's so much I still don't know," and and I thought I was over the outrage, like, but
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot more outrageous stuff to dig
Oh
in.
yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly what's in the movie, but I've studied quite a bit of history, and oh boy, yeah. There's a lot of stuff about the past 100 years of history that the way that some of these conflicts have been allegedly started is not necessarily the true history. I mean, there, for example, there's have you heard of the Frankist or Sabbatean cult from the 1600s?
I've heard of many cults, but not that one.
That one, okay. Well, yeah, this is a reformist movement that I think was actually a psyop against. Well, it was a psyop in and of itself. It was a reformist Jewish movement because to try to reform Judaism, and specifically to try to amend the kind of sacred text by a man named Shabbati Tezvi in 1650, I want to say, somewhere around there. And they created the Sabbatean cult, and it was all about bringing the Jewish people back to Israel to take the homeland, um, bringing back, let's see, reforming the Judaism so that it could include this idea that this man, Shabbati Tezvi, was the Jewish Messiah. And because he was the Jewish Messiah, he had the ability to amend sacred texts. Now, in traditional Jewish law and culture, you can't even like question the authenticity of the text. You can't even suggest that they might have been written by something other than Gabriel or the agent of God, but so to speak. And this man did that, and he ended up going to Palestine, which was controlled by an Islamic king at the time. The Islamic king, with all of his and Shabbati Tezvi came in with all of his fathers or his followers. They were going to try to retake Israel, and the Sultan at the time said, "No, no, no, you're not going to do that. And not only that, if you don't convert to Islam, we're going to kill you." So he converted to Islam. And converting to Islam as an Orthodox Jew, I mean, you can't do that. That's like a grievous sin. Um, so the way that they handled that, and this is where it gets really interesting, is they said, well, that's okay though, because in order for the Messiah to do the work, he has to sin and use sin as a tool to do that. So it's okay. So then they started to come up with the idea, well, because the the rapture won't come. That they don't call it the rapture; they call it something else. I can't remember the name, but in the Jewish faith, they call it. I think when the Messiah comes, or when the world is brought to paradise, or something like that. It says that it will either happen in times of great purity or times of great guilt. So they say their philosophy was, well, since our Messiah just converted to Judaism, which was a sin, then what this must be a sign that says we have to organize our cult, although they didn't call it that, our organization around the idea that we need to make the world as sinful as humanly possible, and that through that will bring the transition in, will bring the golden age in. So literally their concept was, since we can't all be saints, let us be sinners. And then they started to have like massive orgies. They started to do all sorts of debauchery. And like, I mean, literally they took the idea of sin and inequity and maliciousness and nefariousness to the absolute maximum. One of their precepts was, the best type of sin is the sin begotten for the sin itself. So just doing a horrible deed was like the best thing you could do in their eyes. And these people infused themselves in every major religion. They disappeared into religions, meaning they converted to Islam, they converted to Christianity, they converted to Judaism, and they disappeared from public view,
Mhm.
secretly working behind the scenes. And most of the past 300 years of history is shaped by this group. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. From what I heard from this documentary, it includes, I think, this story and 2,000 years back. It goes really
Really?
back. Yeah,
Okay, I'll just check it out.
and it's pretty on point down the rabbit hole. I mean, I mean, I've always known, like in my heart, that this is how the cabal works and all that stuff. But then, like, examining my own beliefs, I mean,
Right.
to believe something for a whole lifetime that was just like indoctrinated in you, and you actually believe it, and you realize, oh my gosh, that was actually just a program.
Yeah,
Whoa.
it's crazy.
Everything that we know about life, about sex, about parenting, about education, about the cosmos, about reality itself is a planned psyop.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's really troubling for a lot of people. I have fun with it. I like to play with my mind and find out the truth, but sometimes it's definitely shaking. And you grow up thinking that history books are just written like in this blockchain format, like people just noting what happened every day on a typing press. Like, no, it's completely made up. Wow.
Sure. Yeah.
And so like, and that was back then before the internet. Now we're in this age where anybody could just put up a blog, and you've seen what it's like to be targeted in a smear campaign. I've had the same thing happen to me. If you Google
Mm.
my name, two things come up. You know, this guy's really great. He makes lots of cool stuff. Or two, he's a scam artist. He's trying to kill everybody. and
Yeah. Yeah.
and then people just freak out and have all kinds of responses to that. It's amazing how malleable our consciousness is, isn't it?
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
Can
Absolutely.
be, yeah, in the early stages.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
well, dude, it's been over an hour, almost an hour here in our interview,
Oh,
and
wow. Okay.
shared so much. But I'd love to hear more if you want, just about your personal message right now, where you
Yeah.
are at with your life and stillness in the storm. What's really alive and burning in your heart? What's real for you?
Sure. Well, I've been working on a lot of different projects. I was fortunate to be in a position where somebody who really wanted to support Stillness in the Storm um, said, "Hey," because I put out a call or an update. I think it was in May, saying, I'm struggling because there was just so much work to do. I've ever since Julian, my partner, transitioned, I've been doing the lion's share of everything myself, and things have been continuing to grow, and I'm learning more, and I'm trying to do more. So the plate, there's more stuff just like piling on my plate, like as fast and furious as I can. And I was working like, some days it was like 16 hours, other days it was a little less, like 10 or 12 hours, but pretty much every day I'm putting in a good chunk of work. Even despite all that, I still wasn't able to work on a lot of the really important projects I think I wanted to. So I put out a call. Somebody who had been following my work for quite some time said, "Listen, I really like what you do. I don't know what you need as far as financial support, but I'm willing to help you so that you can hire somebody else on." And that's what I did. And I hired Jeremy McDonald on. He came on in I think it was July. Yeah, July, 1st of July. And he's been helping with a lot of the behind the scenes work, which, I mean, there's tons of stuff. It's just never ending. So that's been amazing. So because of that, I've been able to do a lot of cool things, and he's been doing cool things too. So we kind of created this work sharing program, so to speak, where we're able to do our individual work, but also kind of share the more mundane aspects of the work. And so because of that, I was able to go to a presentation at Mount Shasta in August this past year, which was really good. I'm actually going to be posting that presentation, which was I entitled it "Disclosure Consciousness: How the Truth Changes Us in the World." and I get into a lot of the philosophy, the psychology of who we are, and then what happens when we actually start doing the inner work, like how that changes our body. It changes the electromagnetic spectrum. It makes us more telepathic, more connected, and how that affects the world. So I'm going to be posting that here probably, even if not today, tomorrow. Um, so I'm also going to be writing a book about that similar type of a topic. And I'm not, it's still in the kind of brainstorming phase with that. My tendency is I tend to be really like over detailed and very verbose. So but the challenge for me is not to turn it into like a 500-page book, but I'm going to be doing that here soon. I also have some educational projects. I think that creating either a foundation or an academy or an institute, I don't know what to call it right now, but something where all of these tools that we've each been developing as far as consciousness, learning, educating ourselves as far as our beingness, but also like how to apply various topics like for permaculture and socialization. How do we build like a golden age society? How do we deal with social problems? How do we solve like psychological issues? Like the answering those questions, I feel like we could create a think tank for. So we all, I mean, I know you've been doing great work. You've been obviously distilling a lot of wisdom in your life. I have. Let's pool our resources together. Let's figure out a way to engage in dialogue about answering these questions. How do we solve problems? And then develop a program to facilitate that.
That's something I know we'd both be very interested in, Joshua and I. That's actually one of my hidden agendas behind it, just interviewing you. I realized a month ago, because we're very, very on the same page you are with ever.is. Like, well, what do we really need right now? Well, we really need alliances, and we need to join and band together with other people who are doing this, because there's a lot of people like you and us out there, but they're really scattered around.
Yes.
Not really working together. And so I really love to talk with you after the interview for a little bit to explore some ideas of what we can do.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's where we're moving forward. I mean, I'm currently trying to develop um, uh, educational tools. You know, ultimately I want to develop some type of academy that is probably under an umbrella of some type of collective or coalition. So just imagine for a moment, like all of the best alternative media people that really cared about making the world a better place and weren't in it for egocentric reasons came together. We created these educational tools, and then we worked with the community as our own students, because I mean, I don't know it all, so I'm going to be educating myself, but then we give back through teaching and education, and then we uplift the community, and then people from the community who may not have the platforms to do that can then come and share their knowledge and information. Imagine what that would look like after a year, where all of us are starting to synthesize and educate ourselves about what this information is, and then work together to solve all of our mutual problems. And then what does that look like after 10 years? What does it look like after 20 years? I mean, I think the sky's the limit. I mean, one of the things I've learned and discovered through my research into law and philosophy and consciousness is that the source of all wealth is not money. It's not gold. It's human beings, people coming together saying, hey, you have an interest in something. I have an interest in something. Let's work together. Let's use our minds and our hearts to energize this thing, breathe life into it, and then create from it. And literally all wealth that you can think of from a social perspective comes from that. So,
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm personally excited about cryptocurrency, but not just Bitcoin, especially Ethereum, and the idea of actually having an idea and then issuing a currency based on your idea because you want to create something. And I won't get too much into it, but I think it has an incredible potential. People, whenever I went to seminars on, how the cabal works and how this financial oppression really works, the birth certificate conspiracy, they always say, the powers that be or where they understand how this wealth creation process works on a cosmic level, just by your own being, by your birth, you actually birth wealth into existence because you are creator, and that's
right.
how they monetize you. And it's all about coming back into that, and owning that. So
Precisely. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's some of the projects I'm working on. I'm going to start doing more webinars. I'm probably going to be doing a webinar with Teresa Yanaris. Next month, I'm going to be doing probably a few more. I want to start doing more community outreach projects, because one thing I learned, and I've heard a lot, but I really got an awareness of it at the Eclipse of Disclosure event, is that people are desperately need community. And we're living in the age of the internet where people can connect with each other. So how do we do that? How do we teach people how to be in community, first of all? Because that's not necessarily some automatic skill that people have. And then how do we facilitate and bring that to people so we can start to nurture and support each other as physical human beings in the flesh? I mean, I think that is so important. The ability to develop fellowship, to develop honest, valid, and vulnerable relationships with people where we can really start to support each other as human beings. And then, not just to talk about, aliens and free energy technology, but like what you're going through in your life right now. How can I help you as a fellow human being, support you in your life? How can I help you to become a materially abundant so that you're not in this like rat in a cage mentality anymore? Scarcity consciousness. Once we can get people out of that, then life just improves in general, and now there's way more energy and focus to direct towards more altruistic kind of grand big picture projects like that. So
Yeah, what you're saying is right, spot on with what we are realizing right now with our mission with Ever.
awesome.
We I've always been materially abundant and had a lot of businesses and all that until like a year and a half. We just really hit a roadblock. My best friend and partner got shot with a shotgun in a home invasion, actually just in that
Oh my
house,
God.
just in that house back there.
Wow.
And yeah, we like lost everything in the process. We were launching like documentaries, and we had some money, but had to spend most of it on hospital bills, and just life like imploded. It was a huge phoenix and rebirth, out of which both of us came out saying, you know what, fuck everything else. We really just want to do what we love, which is what I'm doing here with you right now, talking about these topics and bringing this consciousness out there and myself to the world. And so we started ever.is. We just started doing a weekly podcast, and we had plans to start doing webinars, or start doing coaching, and start just doing group events, paid events, because we need to make money. You are in this world. Yeah, you want to go. You're going to have to meet that again, right?
Right.
And there was this real trauma, which I think a lot of people go through, and perhaps maybe even yourself, which is deep and cellular. It was like, well, can I actually have fun and make money at the same time? Can I do what I love, and will I still get taken care of? Yes, sure. Actually, that's the biggest one that's hidden from us, and perhaps what they really don't want us to know. But
right.
And so we actually just did it a few weeks ago. We launched our first ever. We called it a 2-day online retreat. Let the Magic Flow. Called Let the Magic Flow. Is all about how to biohack water. Very, very big into water. Both Josh and I have been doing it over 20 years collectively together. And so we went into it. And it was just like a $50 event. And, we had a lot of people sign up, and it was, it's not definitely making us not millionaires, but it pays the bills. And now we're at this point where it's like, whoa, we can actually do what we love. And that wasn't what was cool. The cool part was the actual feedback from the community of people saying, we love this and we want more, because it gave us the excuse to gather together online in a webinar setting with over 200 people and create a community for 3-4 hours. And It was really just alive and vibrant. And I think a lot of these sites like yours, especially, and ours, are begging for more community interaction, not just paid events, but like this togetherness, other than just people randomly reading an article about the next UFO disclosure sensationalism, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I got out of my experience at Eclipse of Disclosure, and just when I meet people in general. I mean, community is everything. And psychologically, there's a serious intimacy crisis. I mean, I could talk about this for hours, basically, because this is something I've been passionately studying, but I'm trying to answer the question, like, why do people become selfish? Why are there tyrants? Why are there people stealing? Why do people act with dishonor and dishonestly, in the world? And in answering that question, which I've been asking myself for years, I've kind of come to the understanding that it's the conditions that we raise our children in, and then we maintain those conditions in various ways throughout society. And one of them is a lack of intimacy. We've forgotten how to really love each other and accept each other unconditionally and support each other. So the awakening community has an incredible opportunity to bring that back, into people's lives. And, just being able to hold space with somebody, listen to them honestly, because you really actually care about what they're going through, and have that come through. I mean, nothing could be more helpful to somebody than that. Way more helpful than handing them, $50,000 from Nassar and be like, here you go. So yeah, I think that figuring out ways to do this, and to speak to the money issue, because I know it's a sensitive one, so I want to address that for a moment. Is I have ads on my website. I receive donations, and I have Patreon, and I take PayPal. And some people say, well, you're not really doing the spiritual work because you're making money, and if you really want to do the work, you have to not make money. And unfortunately, I don't think that's practical. And I don't even think it's logical, or there's any basis to say that that's even true. I mean, we're living in a world where money is a resource, just like air, just like water, just like food. Nobody can survive on this planet without money, whether it's because you're being supported by somebody else's money or you're making it yourself. So the sooner we can get out of this like scarcity mindset, this really like what I call pathological idealism mindset, which is that we have to do the great work, we have to transform the planet, we have to heal ourselves, we have to learn the truth, but we can't use money. Well, what does that mean? It means everybody has to work an 8-hour job that usually consumes more than 8 hours, because you got to get to work and do all these other things. So literally all of your day is consumed just with making enough money to survive and eat. And if I had to do that, I mean, and I'm not saying this to like hold people hostage, but this is just the fundamental truth. I couldn't do Stillness in the Storm. I couldn't do this interview. I couldn't do all the things that I do. I couldn't do the research. I couldn't write. I couldn't do pretty much everything I do, because that all requires the proper energy and time. So it's not that I'm saying, you have to pay me to get these things. But what I am saying is we have opportunities in a credit-based monetary system. It's not that you have nothing and you have to go and work to get it. It's the reverse. It's you're seen as implicitly valuable, that you have innate value, you have innate potential, and you have this incredible capacity to create. So in a credit-based monetary system, the system supports you, not asking for anything, but just knowing that if they support you well enough, you're going to blossom and do amazing things. So that's kind of the transition I think we need to go to as far as money creation. Support the people that positively contribute to you. Like I support a lot of people. I support them by clicking on their ads, because that's one way to support them. I support them through donations. I support them by buying their books and their products. And that's because they've positively contributed to my life and what I'm able to do. And if we can get into this, instead of being in a selfish mindset, we get into a selfless, and I put quotes around that because I don't think it's totally selfless, but we can get into a gifting type of a mindset. Then we can really transcend the scarcity consciousness, and then we can all help each other become abundant. And I think that's really important to think about, is in that abundance consciousness that comes first from ideas. So initially, before we can be materially abundant as a society, we need to have the conversation like, okay, well, how do we create abundance? How can we learn these tools? How can we implement these tools as a community? How can we build the social structures so that we can work with each other in trust and in cooperation and transparency? How can we face the problems that are going to happen because we're people? And how do we maintain this order and coherence? And if we can do that, which we can, I mean, this is nothing new. We're not reinventing the wheel here. All the tools are available to us. We just have to use them. Then, I mean, really, the sky's the limit. We can create Star Trek type society. We can create, Blue Avian type society. We can create a society that is so amazing and is completely undreamed of. And that's the vision I'm trying to move towards. So
Beautiful, man. I feel you. Yeah, really well said.
Awesome. Well, cool. So I think we're wrapping up, I guess, at this point, huh?
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to end it. I don't know where I could follow that. I think we could do a whole follow-up podcast just on that topic and the intimacy thing you mentioned. I'd love to have you back on the show, Justin.
Yeah, I'd love to be back. It was great. I really enjoyed it.
Epic to meet you. For those of you guys who want to get more of Justin's stuff and just follow his website, well, it's www.stillnessinthestorm.com. I don't know what else you have that you might want to plug here. Links.
Sure. SoulandSinstorm.com. If you go to that website, right up at the top, there's a tab called Social Media. That's where all of the social media is listed, like Twitter, which is Twitter/SITSSHOW, Facebook/SITSSHOW, and then the YouTube. And yeah, that's where I hang out, and you can get in touch with me there, and I post a whole bunch of stuff. So
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening or watching. You can, well, if you're listening to this on the podcast, there's actually a video version which we're posting on the website, www.ever.is. You can check out all the other podcasts and awesome stuff there. And click on events to see what else we're doing up soon. Maybe something even with Justin. We'll see. Thanks a lot, Justin.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me.